He had everything: title, wealth, the envy of every peer in England. Yet Benedict Ashford, Duke of Thornbury, felt nothing but emptiness in the gilded halls of his ancestral estate. Disgusted by the fawning courtiers and calculating debutantes who saw only his coronet, he made a reckless decision to abandon his identity and pose as a simple traveller at his cousin's country manor. There, he would observe the world as it truly was, unvarnished by the flattery that suffocated him. But on his third evening, standing unnoticed in a shadowed corridor, he heard a voice, soft, crystalline, and utterly unguarded. The new governess, Miss Delilah Crane, was whispering to a child about nobility, honour, and the worthlessness of titles without character. Her words struck him like a blade, and in that moment everything he believed about himself, his world, and his future shattered. If you're listening to this story, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments from which part of the world you're listening to this story. I want to know how far it has traveled. The spring of 1815 brought with it the fragrance of cherry blossoms and the suffocating weight of expectation. Benedict Ashford, the 9th Duke of Thornbury, stood at the tall windows of his London townhouse, gazing out at the manicured gardens that stretched before him like a tableau of perfection. Everything in his life was perfect, meticulously arranged, and utterly devoid of authenticity. At 30 years of age, Benedict possessed everything society deemed desirable. His dark hair, swept back from a noble brow, framed features that sculptors would envy: sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes the colour of stormy seas. His fortune was vast, his estates legendary, his lineage impeccable. Mothers thrust their daughters at him with the desperation of merchants hawking wares at market. Every word spoken in his presence was measured, calculated, designed to curry favour or extract advantage. He despised it all. "Your Grace, the Duchess of Marlborough has sent yet another invitation," his secretary, Mr. Pemberton, announced from the doorway. The elderly man's voice carried the weariness of one who had witnessed this pattern for years. "She insists her daughter, Lady Arabella, is most eager to make your acquaintance." Benedict turned from the window, his expression carved from ice. "Lady Arabella is the third daughter this season alone whose mother has insisted upon my acquaintance. Tell me, Pemberton, does anyone in London possess an original thought, or are we all simply following the same tedious script?" Pemberton's lips twitched with suppressed amusement. "Society does tend toward repetition, Your Grace. However, one might argue that you participate in the script by attending these events." "A fair point," Benedict conceded, moving toward his desk where correspondence lay stacked in neat piles. "Which is why I've decided to abandon London entirely." The secretary's eyebrows rose. "Your Grace, my cousin, Lord Edmund Hartwell, has been pressing me to visit his estate in Derbyshire. I believe I shall accept his invitation." Benedict paused, a plan forming in his mind with crystalline clarity. "However, I shall arrive not as the Duke of Thornbury, but as Mr. Benedict Ashford, a gentleman of modest means travelling through the countryside." Pemberton's shock was evident. "Your Grace, surely you cannot be serious. The deception will be precisely what allows me to observe the world as it truly is," Benedict interrupted, his voice firm with resolve. "For once in my life, I wish to know what people truly think, how they truly behave when they believe no duke is watching. Edmund is discreet. He will maintain my confidence. I leave tomorrow." The journey to Derbyshire took 3 days by carriage, each mile carrying Benedict further from the suffocating expectations of the ton and deeper into the verdant countryside that had always called to his soul. He travelled with minimal luggage and only one trusted valet who had been sworn to secrecy. As the carriage rolled through villages where people actually smiled without calculation, Benedict felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Anticipation. Hartwell Manor rose from the Derbyshire hills like a jewel of honey-coloured stone. its Elizabethan architecture softened by centuries of ivy and climbing roses. Edmund Hartwell, a cheerful man of 40 with the expanding waistline and genuine warmth in his eyes, greeted Benedict at the entrance with barely contained glee. "Benedict! Or should I say Mr. Ashford?" Edmund clasped his cousin's hand with enthusiasm. "This is the most delicious intrigue I've been part of in years. Come, let me show you to your quarters, modest ones, naturally, befitting a simple gentleman. I've told the staff you're a friend from university, travelling before settling into estate management somewhere in the north." Benedict smiled, the first genuine smile he'd worn in weeks. "And your guests? You wrote that you had a house party assembled." "A small gathering," Edmund assured him as they climbed the wide oak staircase. "Local gentry mostly. The vicar and his wife, a retired colonel and his sister, a widow from the neighbouring estate, and of course my own household. Nothing too grand. Oh, and we've just hired a new governess for my daughters, Miss Crane. She arrived only yesterday. Comes highly recommended from a family in Hampshire. Excellent references, though she's quite young for the position. 23, I believe." They reached a comfortable chamber overlooking the gardens, furnished with taste but without ostentation. Benedict removed his gloves, examining the space with approval. "Perfect. And your family? How are Catherine and the girls?" "Catherine is in excellent spirits, and the girls are terrors as always," Edmund said fondly. "Sophia is 10, and convinced she should be allowed to read nothing but Gothic novels. Harriet is 8, and has developed an alarming interest in natural philosophy. She keeps bringing insects into the house for observation, hence the need for Miss Crane. Our previous governess retired to Bath, claiming she was too old for such spirited pupils." That evening, Benedict descended to dinner dressed in simple but well-tailored evening wear, the attire of a gentleman of comfortable but unremarkable means. The other guests had already assembled in the drawing-room, and as he entered he observed them with an anthropologist's keen eye. The transformation was immediate and remarkable. People glanced at him with polite interest rather than calculating avarice. They nodded in greeting rather than rushing forward to monopolize his attention. A young lady near the piano looked up from her music, saw him, and simply smiled before returning to her playing. No one curtsied with theatrical depth or maneuvered to position themselves in his line of sight. It was extraordinary. "Everyone, may I present Mr. Benedict Ashford, an old friend from Cambridge," Edmund announced. "Benedict, allow me to introduce our guests." The introductions proceeded with comfortable informality. Colonel Weatherby, a robust man with magnificent whiskers, discussed the local hunt. Mrs. Weatherby, the colonel's sister, proved to be a sharp-witted woman with opinions on everything from agriculture to the quality of roads. The Reverend Mr. Holloway and his wife were earnest and kind. Mrs. Margaret Sutton, the widow, was elegant and reserved, her mourning period recently concluded. And then, just as they were moving toward the dining room, 2 small whirlwinds burst into the chamber. "Papa!" The girls rushed toward Edmund, their governess following at a more sedate pace. "Miss Crane said we might say good night before bed, but Sophia wanted to show you her drawing first, and I found the most magnificent beetle in the library." "Harriet, young ladies do not discuss beetles at dinner-time," Catherine Hartwell gently chided, though her eyes danced with amusement. She turned to the young woman who had entered behind the children. "Miss Crane, thank you for bringing them down. Girls, make your curtsies and then off to bed." Benedict's attention fixed on the governess, and for a moment he forgot to breathe. Delilah Crane was not beautiful in the conventional sense demanded by society. She was something far more arresting, striking, with an intelligence in her grey eyes that suggested she saw more than most people wished to reveal. Her hair, a rich chestnut brown, was dressed simply but becomingly. Her gown was that of a governess, plain, modest, well-made, but without embellishment, and yet she wore it with a quiet dignity that made every debutante's elaborate confection seem suddenly garish by comparison. But it was her expression that truly captured him. She looked at the assembled company with neither obsequiousness nor presumption. Her gaze was direct, thoughtful, measuring. When those grey eyes passed over him briefly, Benedict felt as if he had been read like one of the books lining Edmund's library. The girls performed their curtsies with varying degrees of grace. Sophia's nearly perfect, Harriet's enthusiastic but unbalanced, and were ushered away by their governess. As Delilah Crane departed, Benedict heard her soft voice drifting back through the doorway. "Now, Miss Harriet, we shall examine your beetle tomorrow with proper scientific methodology. And Miss Sophia, I've left a new novel on your bedside table, a respectable one, I assure you, though it has quite enough drama to satisfy." The voice faded, and Benedict realized he was staring at the empty doorway like a fool. The house party at Hartwell Manor settled into a comfortable rhythm over the following days. Benedict found himself enjoying the unpretentious company in ways he had forgotten were possible. Conversations ranged from philosophy to farming, without the artificial constraints of ton society. No one fawned over him or sought his patronage. He was simply Mr. Ashford, an agreeable gentleman with reasonable opinions and a pleasant manner. Yet increasingly, his attention was drawn to the one person who remained largely absent from these gatherings, the governess. Miss Crane took her meals in the schoolroom with her charges and appeared in the main rooms only briefly, usually when delivering or retrieving the Hartwell daughters. But Benedict found himself noticing her presence with an acuity that surprised him. He would hear her voice in the upper corridors, patient and encouraging as she taught lessons. He would glimpse her in the garden, walking with the girls as they collected specimens for their nature studies. Once he saw her in the library, standing on a ladder to reach a high shelf, completely absorbed in reading the spine of a leather-bound volume. She seemed to exist in a separate world, not quite a servant, not quite a guest, moving through the household with quiet competence and an inner self-possession that intrigued him profoundly. On his third evening at Hartwell Manor, Benedict found himself wakeful after dinner. The other guests had retired. Edmund had disappeared into his study, and the house had settled into nocturnal stillness. Restless, Benedict wandered the corridors, drawn by an impulse he could not name toward the upper floors where the schoolroom and nursery were located. He told himself he was simply exploring the house. Edmund would not mind. He was being ridiculous, stalking about like a lovesick youth. And then he heard it. A voice, soft and clear, drifting from a half-open door. Benedict paused, hidden in the shadows of the corridor's alcove. Through the doorway he could see into the schoolroom, where lamplight cast a warm glow. Harriet sat at a small desk, her young face troubled. Miss Crane knelt beside her, one hand gently resting on the child's shoulder. "But Miss Crane, Papa says that being a Hartwell means something," Harriet was saying, her voice thick with tears. "He says we have a name to uphold, and duties, and that our family has always served honourably. But today in the village, I heard Mr. Grimsby at the shop saying that Lord Ashworth, he's some great duke or something, that he's so proud and cold that people are afraid to even speak to him. If that's what being noble means, being so grand that no one can talk to you, then I don't want to be important at all." Benedict froze, his breath caught in his throat. Lord Ashworth, they must mean him, though the name was garbled. The shopkeeper had been discussing him, the Duke of Thornbury, and not favourably. Delilah's response came softly, but with absolute conviction. "Harriet, listen to me carefully, because this is perhaps the most important lesson I can teach you," she said, her voice carrying a weight that suggested hard-won wisdom. "A title, whether you're a duke or a baronet or a simple mister, is nothing more than a word. It's a label that society places on you, passed down through accidents of birth. It has no inherent meaning, no moral weight." The governess rose and moved to the window, her profile illuminated by moonlight. Benedict pressed deeper into the shadows, transfixed. What matters? The only thing that truly matters is character. Delilah continued. Who you choose to be when no one is watching, how you treat those who have no power to help or harm you, whether you use whatever privileges you possess to lift others up or simply to elevate yourself further above them. But the Duke, Harriet began. I cannot speak to this particular Duke's character as I have never met him, Delilah said with careful diplomacy. But I can tell you this. I have known men with no title whatsoever who possessed more nobility in their smallest finger than some lords carry in their entire being, and I have known peers of the realm who were nothing more than polished coins, bright and impressive on the surface, but hollow and worthless beneath. She turned back to Harriet, and her expression was fierce with passion. Your father is right that being a Hartwell means something, but not because of the name itself. It means something because your family has chosen, generation after generation, to act with honor, to treat tenants fairly, to contribute to your community, to raise children who understand that privilege is not a right to be hoarded, but a responsibility to be wielded with care. That is what makes a name meaningful. That is what makes a person noble, regardless of what title appears before their name in the peerage. Harriet's tears had stopped. So, if this Duke is cold and proud, that's his choice? Not something that being a Duke made him? Exactly, Delilah confirmed. We are all the sum of our choices, Harriet. Birth gives us a starting point, some more advantageous than others, and that's not fair, but it's reality. What we do with that starting point is what defines us. She helped the child to her feet, guiding her toward the door that led to the bedchambers. Now, let's get you to bed. Tomorrow, we're going to begin our study of astronomy, and I want you well rested so you can fully appreciate the majesty of the cosmos, which I should note cares not at all whether you're titled or common, rich or poor. The stars shine for everyone. As their footsteps faded down the inner corridor, Benedict remained frozen in the alcove. His heart was pounding, his hands trembling slightly. He felt as if he had been stripped naked, every pretension and protection torn away. She was right. God help him, she was absolutely right. He thought of his life, the cold magnificence of Thornbury House, the formal state dinners where conversation died the moment he entered a room, the endless parade of sycophants and fortune hunters. He had blamed them all for the artificiality of his existence. But what had he done to change it? Had he ever once attempted to be simply Benedict rather than the Duke? And what had the shopkeeper said? That he was so proud and cold that people feared to speak to him? Was that who he had become? A man whose very title had become a wall, shutting him off from all genuine human connection? Delilah's words echoed in his mind. What we do with that starting point is what defines us. Benedict made his way back to his chamber in a daze. Sleep, when it finally came near dawn, was troubled by dreams of empty halls and voices he could not reach. He woke with absolute certainty. Something fundamental had shifted in him during those few minutes in the darkened corridor. The Duke of Thornbury, who had thought himself above the petty concerns of common morality, who had wrapped himself in the protective armor of his rank, had been judged by a governess who did not even know his identity, and found profoundly wanting. The question now was what he intended to do about it. Benedict emerged from his chamber the following morning with the grim determination of a soldier preparing for battle. The words he had overheard had not simply stung, they had illuminated a truth he had been avoiding for years. If he was to change, to become something more than a hollow title, he needed to understand how to be simply human again. And the woman who had unknowingly issued that challenge was the only person who could teach him. Over the following week, Benedict found ways to observe Miss Delilah Crane without being obvious about it. During morning walks in the garden, he would happen upon her lessons outdoors. At the library in the afternoons, he would request books from shelves near where she studied. He watched her interact with the Hartwell daughters, firm but never harsh, educational but never pedantic, encouraging curiosity while instilling discipline. More tellingly, he observed how she interacted with the household staff. She thanked the footman who brought coal for the schoolroom fire. She inquired about the scullery maid's mother who was ill. She discussed recipe adaptations with the cook that might help young Harriet's sensitive digestion. Every person she encountered was treated with the same respectful consideration, regardless of their station. It was revolutionary. "You're staring," Edmund murmured one afternoon as they took port in the study. Outside, visible through the window, Delilah was conducting a botany lesson in the garden with the girls. Benedict jerked his attention back to his cousin. "I beg your pardon?" "At Miss Crane. You've been watching her for days, like she's some sort of fascinating puzzle you're trying to solve." Edmund's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Should I be concerned for my governess's virtue? You may be posing as a simple mister, but you're still a duke, and I won't have her position compromised." "I would never," Benedict began hotly, then caught himself. He set down his glass and ran a hand through his hair. "I overheard her speaking to Harriet several nights ago, about nobility, about character, about what truly makes a person worthy of respect." "Ah," Edmund said, understanding dawning. "And it struck rather close to home." "Like an arrow to the heart," Benedict admitted. "Edmund, have I become the sort of man who inspires fear rather than respect? Cold and proud, as some shopkeeper apparently described me?" His cousin was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "You've become protected, Benedict. And who can blame you? You've been hunted since the moment you inherited. Every word you speak is analyzed for advantage. Every friendship is scrutinized for ulterior motive. It's natural that you've built walls, but those walls have also prevented any genuine connection," Benedict said quietly. "I've been so busy protecting myself from fortune hunters and sycophants that I've shut out the possibility of authentic relationship altogether. Miss Crane treats everyone, from the youngest scullery maid to my own self in this disguise, with equal dignity. She doesn't calculate the value of her courtesy based on someone's station. She simply sees people. When was the last time I truly saw another person, Edmund? When was the last time I allowed someone to see me?" Edmund leaned forward. "Then perhaps this charade of yours is the opportunity you needed. Mr. Benedict Ashford can do things the Duke of Thornbury cannot. Talk to her, not as a duke condescending to a governess, but as one human being to another." The opportunity came the following day, quite by accident. Benedict was in the library, genuinely absorbed in a treatise on agricultural improvements, when Delilah entered. She paused at the doorway, clearly not expecting to find anyone there at this hour. The girls were having their music lesson with Catherine. "Mr. Ashford," she said, moving to leave. "Forgive me. I didn't mean to disturb you." "You're not disturbing me at all," Benedict said quickly, rising from his chair. "Please don't leave on my account. The library is large enough for both of us." She hesitated, then nodded and moved toward the shelves containing works on natural history. Benedict watched her from the corner of his eye, trying to appear engrossed in his reading, while his entire being was focused on her presence. After several minutes of silence, he spoke. "Miss Crane, may I ask you something?" She turned, her expression politely attentive. "Of course, Mr. Ashford. I happened to be passing by the schoolroom several nights ago. I couldn't sleep and was exploring the house, and I overheard part of a conversation you were having with Miss Harriet about nobility and character." A faint blush colored her cheeks, and she looked momentarily mortified. "I apologize if I spoke out of turn. I'm aware that my opinions on such matters may be considered presumptuous for someone in my position." "On the contrary," Benedict said, moving closer, "I found your perspective extraordinarily insightful. You said that titles are merely labels, and that true nobility comes from character. Do you truly believe that?" Delilah's chin lifted slightly, a defensive gesture that told him she'd been criticized for her views before. "I do. I've had occasion to observe many families in my years as a governess, Mr. Ashford. I've seen cruelty disguised by fine titles and genuine goodness in those society dismisses as inconsequential. One's behavior when no benefit can be derived from courtesy, that reveals true character." "You must have observed a great deal to form such definite conclusions," Benedict said carefully. May I ask about your background? Forgive me if the question is impertinent." She was quiet for a moment, and he wondered if she would refuse to answer. Then she said softly, "I am the daughter of a clergyman, Mr. Ashford. My father served a parish in Hampshire until his death 3 years ago. He was a learned man who believed education was the birthright of every child, regardless of sex or station. He taught me languages, philosophy, science, everything he would have taught a son. When he died, my mother and I were left with very little. She went to live with her sister, and I sought a position where I could use my education to support myself. You've had other positions before this one." "2 others. The first family dismissed me because I taught their daughter mathematics, and they felt it would make her unmarriageable." Her voice was dry with irony. "The second family I left of my own accord when I discovered the master of the house held inappropriate expectations regarding the female staff." Benedict's hands clenched. "He didn't—" "No," she said quickly. "I left before any harm came to me, though I fear for the maids who remained. But that is the reality for women in my position, Mr. Ashford. We exist in a precarious space, educated enough to interact with our employers' families, but powerless to refuse mistreatment. It gives one a rather clear-eyed view of how people wield power." "And the Hartwells?" he asked gently. For the first time, her expression softened into a genuine smile. "Are everything I could have hoped for. Lord and Lady Hartwell treat their staff with respect. The children are intelligent and curious. I have access to this magnificent library and the freedom to teach as I see fit. I count myself extraordinarily fortunate." Benedict studied her, this young woman who had suffered loss and witnessed the worst of his class's behavior, yet maintained such remarkable dignity and principle. "Your father must have been an exceptional man to have raised such a daughter." "He was," Delilah said simply. "He taught me that a person's worth is not determined by their circumstances, but by their choices, by how they treat those who can offer them nothing in return, by whether they use their advantages, whatever those may be, to help or to harm." The words hung in the air between them, and Benedict felt something shift in his chest. This woman, with her clear grey eyes and uncompromising principles, represented everything he had never allowed himself to seek. Not because she was beautiful, though he was beginning to find her utterly captivating, but because she was real, authentic in a way that no one in his carefully constructed world had ever been allowed to be. "Miss Crane," he said quietly, "I wonder if I might ask your opinion on something. Hypothetically, of course." She tilted her head, curious. "Certainly. Suppose a man, a gentleman of significant rank, found himself isolated by that very rank. Suppose he had become so accustomed to insincerity and calculated behavior from those around him that he no longer knew how to form genuine connections. How would such a man change? How would he learn to be simply human again?" Delilah's gaze sharpened, and for a moment Benedict wondered if she had somehow seen through his disguise. But then she answered thoughtfully, "I would tell this hypothetical gentleman that the answer lies in vulnerability," she said. "Walls that protect us from harm also prevent connection. If he wishes to know others authentically, he must allow himself to be known authentically. He must be willing to speak with people, truly speak, not perform the social dance of the drawing room. He must listen not to respond, but to understand. He must risk being seen as he truly is, flaws and uncertainties included, rather than hiding behind the armor of his rank. And if his rank is the very thing that prevents such authenticity, if people cannot see past his title to the man beneath, then perhaps," Delilah said softly, "he must find ways to interact with others where his title is not the first thing they know about him, where he is judged on his words and actions rather than his coronet." Her eyes met his directly. "Though I suspect, Mr. Ashford, that we are no longer speaking entirely hypothetically." Benedict's breath caught. "Miss Crane, forgive me," she said quickly, colour rising in her cheeks again. "I've overstepped. I should return to my duties." Before he could formulate a response, she had swept from the library, leaving him alone among the books, his heart racing with a mixture of panic and exhilaration. She had seen something, perhaps not the full truth of his identity, but something. And rather than being repelled by her insight, he found himself more drawn to her than ever. Edmund was right. This charade had given him an opportunity. The question was whether he had the courage to truly embrace vulnerability, to risk being known as he truly was. For the first time in years, Benedict Ashford, Duke of Thornbury, felt genuinely afraid, and somehow it felt like the beginning of truly living. The turning point came at the Midsummer Festival, a local celebration that Lord Hartwell hosted annually for the tenants and neighbouring gentry. The grounds of Hartwell Manor were transformed into a fairground of delights, paper lanterns strung between trees, tables laden with food, musicians playing country dances, and children racing about with faces sticky from sweets. Benedict found himself enjoying the informality immensely. As Mr. Ashford, he was free to wander among the guests, conversing with farmers about crop rotations and matrons about the proper way to make blackberry preserves. No one bowed or scraped. No one calculated the advantage to be gained from his favour. They simply accepted him as one of them. And through it all, his attention kept returning to one figure in a simple muslin gown of pale green, moving among the guests with quiet grace. Delilah had been given the afternoon free, as the girls were with their parents. She had clearly been drawn into helping despite the holiday. Benedict saw her assisting elderly Mrs. Cooper to a chair, fetching lemonade for overheated children, and laughing with genuine delight at a juggler's performance. She seemed to glow in the golden afternoon light, more beautiful than any diamond-bedecked debutante he'd ever encountered at Almack's. "You should ask her to dance," Edmund murmured, appearing at his elbow with 2 glasses of punch. "The country dances are beginning, and I notice you've been staring at my governess like a starving man eyeing a feast." "I'm not," Benedict began, then gave up the pretense. "Would it be appropriate? I don't wish to compromise her position." "A country dance at a tenant festival. Perfectly appropriate," Edmund assured him. "Go on, cousin. Seize your opportunity." Benedict approached Delilah, where she stood at the edge of the dancing area, watching the sets form with a small smile. "Miss Crane, would you do me the honor?" She turned, surprise flickering across her face, followed by something that might have been pleasure. "Mr. Ashford, Are you certain? I would not wish to monopolize your time when there are so many young ladies present." "I am absolutely certain," he said firmly, offering his hand, "unless you would prefer not to." "No, I would." She placed her hand in his, and the contact sent a spark of electricity through him. "I would be delighted." They took their places in the set, and as the music began, Benedict felt a curious lightness in his chest. The dance was a simple one, allowing for brief moments of conversation as they moved through the figures. "Are you enjoying the festival?" he asked as they came together in the promenade. "Very much," she replied, her eyes bright. "It reminds me of the village festivals my father used to organize. He believed such celebrations were important for building community cohesion." "Your father sounds like he was a remarkable man." The dance separated them, and when they came together again, Delilah said, "He was. I think you would have liked him, Mr. Ashford. He had very little patience for pretension or social posturing. He judged people by their actions rather than their connections. I'm beginning to think that's the only way to truly know anyone," Benedict said quietly. She studied him with those perceptive grey eyes. "You speak as if this is a recent revelation." "Perhaps it is," he admitted. "Or perhaps I'm simply meeting people for the first time who make pretense impossible." The dance brought them close again, and in the intimacy of the movement, Delilah said softly, "I have a confession to make, Mr. Ashford." His heart skipped. "Oh, I've been thinking about our conversation in the library, about your hypothetical gentleman who feels isolated by his rank." She hesitated, then continued, "I cannot help but wonder if you were speaking of yourself. Not literally, of course, I know you're not titled, but perhaps you've experienced something similar. Perhaps you've moved in circles where you felt you couldn't be authentic. Benedict's mind raced. This was the moment. He could deflect, maintain his disguise, keep the comfortable distance that his deception provided. Or he could embrace the vulnerability she had prescribed, risk being truly known. "You're very perceptive, Miss Crane," he said carefully. "Yes, I have moved in such circles. And I have found that the higher one's station, the more difficult it becomes to know who your true friends are. Everyone wants something. Everyone is performing. How lonely that must be," she said, and the genuine sympathy in her voice nearly undid him. "It is," he admitted, the truth of it like a weight lifting from his chest. "But being here, at Hartwell Manor, conversing with people who have no agenda beyond simple human connection, it's shown me what I've been missing, what I've sacrificed in the name of propriety and position." The dance ended, and they stood facing each other, the noise of the festival fading into background irrelevance. Delilah's expression was troubled, thoughtful. "Mr. Ashford, Benedict, there you are." Edmund's voice boomed across the lawn, and with it came a commotion that made Benedict's blood run cold. A magnificent carriage was approaching, pulled by 4 matched greys that were unmistakably from the Thornbury stables. And climbing down from it was his secretary Pemberton, looking harried and apologetic. "Your Grace," Pemberton called, and the words seemed to echo across the suddenly silent gathering. "Forgive the intrusion, but there's an urgent matter at Thornbury that requires your immediate attention. The Chancellor himself has—" The secretary stopped abruptly, realizing his mistake. Every eye at the festival had turned toward them. Benedict felt Delilah's hand slip from his arm, saw the color drain from her face as understanding dawned. "Your Grace," she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. You're the Duke of Thornbury?" Benedict reached for her, but she stepped back, her expression transforming from shock to something far worse, betrayal. "Miss Crane, please, let me explain. You lied to me," she said, and the hurt in her voice was like a physical blow. "You stood there in the library and asked me about nobility and character, about a hypothetical gentleman of rank, and all the while you were... I was trying to understand," Benedict said desperately, aware of the crowd gathering around them, but unable to care about anything except the devastation in her eyes. "I came here to escape the falseness of my life, to experience authenticity for once. I never meant to deceive you specifically. I didn't even know you existed when I conceived this plan. But once you did know I existed, once we had spoken, once I had shared my views and my history, you said nothing." Her hands were shaking. "I told you about my experiences, about the master who preyed on governesses. I spoke freely, as one equal to another, and all the while you were a duke, observing me like some sort of curiosity, some specimen to be studied. It wasn't like that, wasn't it?" Tears glittered in her eyes, but her voice remained steady. "Tell me, Your Grace, did you find my opinions on nobility entertaining? Did it amuse you to hear a governess philosophize about matters so far above her station? Was I simply another diversion during your country holiday?" "Delilah, please." "Miss Crane," she corrected coldly. The formality was like a door slamming shut between them. "I am Miss Crane, a governess in your cousin's household. You are the Duke of Thornbury, one of the highest-ranking peers in England. There is no conversation to be had between us, Your Grace. There never was. I simply didn't realize it because you chose to make a fool of me." She turned and walked away, her spine straight despite the tears now streaming down her face. Benedict moved to follow, but Edmund caught his arm. "Let her go," his cousin said quietly. "She needs time, and you need to deal with whatever crisis has brought Pemberton here." Benedict wanted to rage, to throw off his cousin's restraining hand and chase after Delilah to make her understand. But already the other guests were pressing forward, the attitudes changing now that they knew his true identity. The bows and curtsies began. The voices took on that too careful tone he despised, and he was trapped once again in the cage of his title. As he allowed himself to be led away to deal with whatever parliamentary crisis required his attention, he looked back once at Delilah's retreating figure. She had reached the manor house and disappeared inside without looking back. The Duke of Thornbury had wanted to learn what it meant to be authentic, to form a genuine connection unburdened by his rank. Instead, he had hurt the one person whose opinion he valued above all others, and he had no idea how to repair the damage he'd done. The parliamentary crisis proved to be less urgent than Pemberton had suggested, a matter of votes and political manoeuvring that Benedict's fellow peers had dramatically exaggerated. He dealt with it swiftly and impersonally, his mind elsewhere, and returned to Hartwell Manor 3 days later with grim determination. The household had shifted in his absence. No longer was he treated as amiable Mr. Ashford. Now servants bowed deeply when he passed. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms. Edmund and Catherine were warm but careful, their easy familiarity replaced by a subtle deference that made Benedict want to overturn furniture in frustration. And Delilah avoided him completely. "She's requested time to seek another position," Catherine told him gently when he inquired. They were in the morning room, and Catherine's expression was sympathetic but firm. "She feels she can no longer remain in a household where she's been compromised." Compromised? Benedict's voice rose. There was nothing inappropriate. Not in the physical sense, no, Catherine agreed. But Benedict, you must understand what this looks like from her perspective. You deceived her. You allowed her to speak freely, to share her genuine thoughts and experiences while maintaining a false identity. For someone in her position, vulnerable, dependent on her reputation, that betrayal cuts deep. She fears that others will assume the worst, that people will think she was complicit in some sort of improper relationship with a duke. Benedict sank into a chair, the full weight of his actions crushing down on him. "I never meant to hurt her. I was trying to escape the falseness of my world, to experience genuine human connection. She represented everything I'd been searching for: authenticity, principle, intelligence. But in seeking authenticity, I created the greatest falseness of all." "Then you must fix it," Catherine said simply. "Not as the Duke of Thornbury, but as Benedict Ashford, the man who values her good opinion above all else. You must prove to her that the man she conversed with in the library, the man who danced with her at the festival, that he was real, that you are capable of being the person your title doesn't require you to be." Finding an opportunity to speak with Delilah proved challenging. She kept to the schoolroom with iron discipline, taking meals there and venturing out only for carefully timed walks when she knew he would be occupied. Finally, Benedict resorted to shameless ambush, stationing himself in the library at the hour when she typically came to select books for the girls' lessons. When she entered and saw him there, she turned to leave immediately. "Please," Benedict said, rising from his chair, 5 minutes. "If you still wish to avoid me after that, I'll respect your wishes, but I'm asking you, begging you, to hear me out." Delilah paused at the doorway, her back to him. After a long moment, she turned. Her face was carefully composed, but he could see the strain around her eyes, the evidence of sleepless nights. 5 minutes, Your Grace," she said coolly. "Then I must return to my duties." "First, let me apologize," Benedict said, remaining where he stood rather than approaching closer. "You're absolutely right. I deceived you, and regardless of my intentions, that deception was wrong. I allowed you to speak freely under false pretenses, and I've compromised your position in this household and potentially your future prospects. For that, I am profoundly sorry." "Apology noted," Delilah said, her tone brittle. "Is there anything else, Your Grace?" "Yes," he said quietly. "I want to explain why I did it. Not to excuse my actions, but so you understand it wasn't about making a fool of you. It was never about you at all. Not initially." He moved to the window, looking out at the gardens where they had danced just days ago. "I'm 30 years old, and I inherited my title at 22. For 8 years, I have been pursued, flattered, lied to, and manipulated by nearly everyone I've encountered. Marriage-minded mamas thrust their daughters at me. Political allies court my favor. Tenants approach me with calculated deference. My closest friends from Cambridge treat me differently now. They weigh their words, consider the implications of casual disagreements. I am never simply Benedict. I am always the Duke first. He turned back to face her, allowing all his weariness and loneliness to show. I came here hoping to escape that for just a few weeks, to be treated as an ordinary man and discover if there was anything of substance beneath my title. And then I met you. Delilah's expression remained guarded, but he saw her hands tighten on the book she held. You spoke to me as an equal, Benedict continued. You shared your thoughts, your experiences, your principles, and for the first time in years I felt seen. Not as the Duke of Thornbury, not as a matrimonial prize or a political ally, but as simply a man. When you spoke about what truly constitutes nobility, character over title, actions over rank, you were describing everything I hoped I could be, but feared I wasn't. So I was an experiment? Delilah asked, her voice sharp. A way to test your theories about authentic connection? No, Benedict said firmly. You were a revelation. You are brilliant, principled, and genuine in ways I didn't know were possible. Talking with you, dancing with you, those were the most real moments I've experienced in years. And yes, I should have told you the truth immediately. I should have trusted you with my identity, but I was afraid. Afraid? She laughed bitterly. You're a duke. What could you possibly have to fear from a governess? Afraid that once you knew my rank, you would stop seeing me, Benedict said simply. That you would become like everyone else, deferential, careful, calculating. And I couldn't bear that, not with you. So I remained silent, selfishly clinging to those moments of connection. I convinced myself I was protecting something precious, when in reality I was simply being a coward. Delilah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer but still wounded. Do you have any idea what your deception has cost me, Your Grace? I am a governess. My reputation is my only asset. Already there are whispers below stairs about the Duke, who paid such particular attention to Lord Hartwell's governess, about private conversations in libraries and dances at festivals. My position here is untenable. I must find another situation. And how do you think prospective employers will view the governess who was the subject of a duke's interest? At best, they'll think me a social climber. At worst, they'll assume I was your mistress. Benedict felt ice flood his veins. I never considered. Delilah, I swear to you, I will provide references that make clear your character is beyond reproach. I will speak to anyone necessary to ensure. Your intercession will only make it worse, she cried, her composure finally cracking. Don't you see? The Duke of Thornbury providing personal references for a governess? That will only fuel speculation. There is nothing you can do, Your Grace. Your attention, however well-intentioned, has destroyed my position in society as surely as if there had been an actual impropriety. She moved toward the door, tears streaming down her face. I am not angry that you're a duke, Your Grace. I'm angry that you thought so little of me, of my vulnerability, of the risks I face daily, that you prioritized your desire for authenticity over my safety. A man of true nobility, the kind defined by character rather than title, would have understood that. Delilah, wait! But she was gone, leaving him alone in the library with the full weight of his selfishness crushing down upon him. Catherine had been wrong. He couldn't fix this as simply Benedict Ashford. That man had been a fiction, a construct that allowed him to avoid the responsibilities and consequences of his true identity. But perhaps the Duke of Thornbury could do what Benedict Ashford could not. That evening, Benedict requested a meeting with Edmund and Catherine. When they assembled in the study, he spoke with absolute conviction. I need your help, he said. I've caused terrible harm to Miss Crane, and I intend to make it right, but I cannot do so alone. What do you propose? Edmund asked carefully. A house party, Benedict said, here at Hartwell Manor. Invite every prominent family in the county, along with select London society, people of impeccable reputation and influence. Make it a grand affair, a celebration of the summer, and ensure that Miss Crane is present as an honoured guest, not as a governess in the background." Catherine's eyes widened. "Benedict, are you certain? Such public attention is exactly what's needed," he interrupted. "The rumours about her position have begun because she's been seen in a liminal space, not quite servant, not quite family. If I publicly demonstrate that she is a woman of education and principle worthy of respect from the highest echelons of society, if I show that my regard for her is based on admiration for her character rather than anything improper, then perhaps I can repair some of the damage I've caused." "And if she refuses to participate," Edmund asked gently, "she may not wish for such attention." "Then I will respect her wishes," Benedict said. "But I must try. I must at least offer her the chance to rewrite the narrative that my selfishness created." Over the next week, invitations were dispatched. The response was overwhelming. Everyone wished to attend a house party hosted by the Duke of Thornbury himself. While the preparations consumed the household, Benedict worked on a different project, a letter to Delilah. He wrote and rewrote it a dozen times before finally producing something that felt adequate to the task. "Miss Crane, I do not ask for your forgiveness, as I know I do not deserve it, but I do ask for your trust one final time. There is to be a house party at Hartwell Manor, and I am formally requesting your attendance as a guest, not as a governess, but as a gentlewoman of education and principle. I wish to introduce you to society in such a way that makes clear the high regard in which I hold your character and intellect. I cannot undo the harm my deception has caused, but I can perhaps prevent it from destroying your future prospects. Please allow me this attempt at restitution. If, after this event, you still wish to seek another position far from my influence, I will provide such references as you require and trouble you no more. Respectfully, Benedict Ashford, Duke of Thornbury." The response came the following day, brief and formal. "I will attend, D.C." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a chance. The evening of the house party arrived with perfect weather, the kind of golden late summer evening that seemed designed for new beginnings. Hartwell Manor glowed with candlelight, its rooms filled with the cream of county and London society. Benedict had spared no expense, determined that this event would be remembered for all the right reasons. He had spent the afternoon in careful preparation, not of the house or the entertainment, but of the guests. Discreet conversations with key society matrons, influential gentlemen, and respected scholars had laid the groundwork for what he hoped to accomplish. By the time the first guests arrived, everyone understood that Miss Delilah Crane was not to be treated as merely a governess, but as a young woman of exceptional education and character, whom the Duke of Thornbury held in the highest esteem. When Delilah descended the stairs that evening, Benedict's breath caught in his throat. Catherine had insisted on providing her with a gown suitable for the occasion, a dress of deep sapphire silk that brought out the grey of her eyes and complemented her chestnut hair, which had been dressed with elegant simplicity. She looked every inch a gentlewoman, her natural dignity enhanced rather than created by the fine clothes. But it was her expression that truly captured him, nervous but resolute, like a soldier marching into battle. Benedict approached her at the foot of the stairs and offered his arm. "Miss Crane, you look magnificent." "Your Grace," she replied formally, but she accepted his arm. "I confess I do not understand what you hope to accomplish this evening." "A chance to right a wrong," he said quietly, as they moved toward the drawing room where guests were assembling. "And perhaps, if you're willing, the beginning of something new." The evening proceeded according to Benedict's carefully orchestrated plan. He introduced Delilah to the Countess of Ravensmore, a formidable society matron known for her patronage of female education. The Countess, already briefed, engaged Delilah in a spirited discussion of natural philosophy that attracted other intellectually minded guests. Soon, Delilah was at the center of a fascinating conversation about scientific methodology, her knowledge and articulate manner impressing everyone present. Later, Benedict guided her to meet Lord Pemberton, no relation to his secretary, who sat on the board of a new institution dedicated to training governesses and establishing standards for the profession. Within minutes, Lord Pemberton was offering Delilah a position on an advisory committee, recognizing her insights from having worked within the system. Throughout the evening, Benedict ensured Delilah was never alone or uncomfortable. But he was careful not to monopolize her attention, allowing her to shine on her own merits. He watched from across the room as she laughed with Lady Catherine's friends, debated philosophy with a Cambridge don, and charmed even the most starched members of the peerage with her genuine warmth and intelligence. This was what he had wanted to show her, that she belonged in any society, that her worth was inherent and undeniable, that his regard for her was based on qualities that everyone else could plainly see once they were given the opportunity. As the evening drew toward dinner, Benedict found himself alone with Delilah on the terrace overlooking the gardens. The sounds of the party drifted out through the open doors, but here there was relative privacy. "You've been orchestrating this entire evening," Delilah said quietly, not looking at him. "Every introduction, every conversation, you arranged it all." "Yes," Benedict admitted. "I wanted society to see what I see, a woman of extraordinary intelligence and character. I wanted to provide opportunities that might otherwise be closed to you because of your position as a governess." "Why?" he asked, finally turning to face him. "Why go to such lengths? Is it truly just guilt?" "No," Benedict said, and he allowed all his carefully maintained ducal reserve to fall away. "It's because, in the short time I've known you, you've changed my entire understanding of what it means to live authentically. You challenged me, unknowingly, to be better than I was. You showed me that character and title are separate things, and that I had been using my rank as both armor and excuse. You made me want to be the kind of man who deserves admiration, not because of what he was born to, but because of who he chooses to be." Delilah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You hurt me, Your Grace. You made me feel foolish and exposed." "I know," Benedict said, his voice rough with emotion, "and I would spend the rest of my life making amends if you would allow it. But I'm not asking for forgiveness tonight. I'm asking for something far more difficult." "What?" "A chance," he said simply. "A chance to begin again. Not as the Duke of Thornbury and his governess, not as Mr. Ashford and Miss Crane, but as Benedict and Delilah. Two people who found something rare and precious in each other's company. Two people who might, with time and honesty, build something genuine and lasting." "You're a duke," Delilah said, and there was anguish in her voice. "I'm a clergyman's daughter with no fortune, no connections, no—" "You are the bravest, most principled person I have ever met," Benedict interrupted. "You are brilliant and kind and absolutely unwilling to compromise your values for the sake of convenience. You see people, truly see them, regardless of their station. You challenge me to be better, and I'm desperately, hopelessly in love with you." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and vulnerable. Delilah stared at him, shock and something that might have been hope warring in her expression. "You cannot mean—" "I mean every word," Benedict said, closing the distance between them. "I understand if you cannot forgive me. I understand if you need time or space, or if you ultimately decide that what I did is unforgivable. But I am asking you, begging you, to consider that the man who spoke with you in the library, who danced with you at the festival, who listens to every word you say as if it might contain the secrets of the universe, that man is who I truly am beneath the title. And that man would count himself the most fortunate of souls if you would give him a chance to prove himself worthy of you." Delilah's composure finally cracked, and tears spilled down her cheeks. "I was so angry with you, so hurt. But even in my anger, I couldn't stop thinking about our conversations, about how seen I felt when we spoke, I told myself it was all false, that you were playing a role. But watching you tonight, seeing how you've tried to help me, how you've respected my boundaries even while trying to make amends," she drew a shaky breath. "I think perhaps the problem wasn't that you were false with me. It's that you were more real than you've allowed yourself to be in years, and that terrified both of us." Benedict reached for her hand, hardly daring to hope. "Then will you give us a chance? Not tonight, not right now, but sometime? Will you allow me to court you properly as Benedict Ashford, who happens to be the Duke of Thornbury, courting Delilah Crane, who happens to be the woman he admires above all others?" Delilah looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. Slowly, a smile, tentative but genuine, curved her lips. I think I would like that, though I have one condition. Anything. No more deception. No more walls. If we do this, we do it with complete honesty, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult." "I swear it," Benedict said solemnly. "Complete transparency, no role-playing, no protective armor, just two people learning to be authentic together." "Then yes," Delilah said softly. "I'll give you a chance. I'll give us a chance." Benedict raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that was both reverent and full of promise. "Thank you. I swear to you, Delilah, I will spend every day proving myself worthy of your trust." From inside the house, the dinner bell rang, calling guests to the meal, but neither Benedict nor Delilah moved immediately. They stood together on the terrace, hands joined, as the golden evening light faded into the deeper blue of twilight. "We should go in," Delilah finally said. "Your guests will wonder where their host has gone." "Let them wonder," Benedict said, but he offered his arm. "Though I suppose if we're to do this properly, I should demonstrate that I can balance my duties as Duke with my desire to spend every possible moment in your company." As they moved toward the door, Delilah laughed, the first genuinely carefree sound he'd heard from her since the revelation of his identity. "This is going to be complicated, isn't it? A duke and a governess." "Extraordinarily complicated," Benedict agreed. "Society will talk. There will be disapproval from certain quarters. The path forward won't be easy. But it will be authentic," Delilah said, meeting his eyes with that clear, challenging gaze he'd come to love. "And perhaps that's what both of us have been searching for all along. A life lived with complete honesty, regardless of what society demands." "Complete honesty," Benedict echoed. "Starting with this, I fully intend to marry you, Delilah Crane. Not immediately. I'll court you properly first. But I want you to know my intentions from the start. I'm not interested in a flirtation or a brief romance. I'm asking you to consider spending your life with me. Is that too much honesty for our first real conversation?" Delilah's smile widened, and in that moment, she was luminous. "No, Your Grace. That's exactly the right amount of honesty. And you should know that I fully intend to make you work for it. You'll have to prove that the man I glimpsed beneath the title is the real Benedict Ashford, and that he can survive the scrutiny of being loved by someone who refuses to be impressed by coronets." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Benedict said, and he realized he meant it with every fiber of his being. They entered the drawing room together, and as the guests turned to look at them, the Duke of Thornbury and the governess who had captured his heart, Benedict felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the vague, desperate hope of a man searching for meaning, but the solid, grounded hope of someone who has finally found his true north. The path forward would be complicated. There would be obstacles, disapproval, moments of doubt. But for the first time since inheriting his title, Benedict wasn't facing the future alone or armored in his rank. He was facing it as simply Benedict, a man in love with an extraordinary woman who had taught him that nobility was not something bestowed by birth, but earned through character, and that was worth more than any coronet in England. 6 months later, the engagement of Benedict Ashford, Duke of Thornbury, to Miss Delilah Crane was announced in the London papers. Society was scandalized and delighted in equal measure. The Countess of Ravensmore declared it the most romantic development of the decade. Lord Pemberton pronounced himself unsurprised, noting that intelligent men inevitably recognized intelligence in others. And in a quiet ceremony at Hartwell Manor, with only close friends and family present, the Duke married his governess, and they began the greatest adventure of all, a life built on authenticity, vulnerability, and the kind of love that sees past every external designation to the person beneath. The Duke of Thornbury had posed as a simple guest to escape the falseness of his world. Instead, he had found something far more valuable, a partner who would never allow him to hide behind his title again, and a love that was completely, beautifully, authentically real. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves dramatic historical romances. Leave a comment telling me what you thought of Benedict and Delilah's journey, and don't forget to let me know from which part of the world you're listening. Your support helps me create more stories like this one. Until next time, may you always have the courage to be your authentic self.